Welcome to Season 3 of Advance the Dream, our interactive community chat where we celebrate legacy makers and family heroes who are actively advancing the dream in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We talk about health challenges, highlights, and heroes in an intergenerational and multicultural fashion to help his legacy of hope, duty, and equality live on through this bi-weekly series powered by the Force for Health Network. We stream live to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn at 8 a.m. Pacific Time and 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the first and third Saturdays of the month. Then shared afterwards at advancethedream.com, part of the Force for Health Network. We welcome your comments from any platform you are watching from to join our discussion and encourage you to connect with us by downloading our app and joining our community for free. Now let's meet our hosts, Dr. Robert Gillio and Lucy Howell from the Force for Health Network, alongside our strategic partner and National Community Director for the Dream, Mr. Joshua Williams. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Advance the Dream, a special series actually that we are kicking off.
Welcome to
Actually, with a focus in education. I am joined by my partner, Joshua Williams, which I'm surprised he's having a little. Where are you at, Josh?
It says I'm in the show, Lucy. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm not seeing you for some strange reason.
Hold on one second. I'm sorry.
Okay, sure. I'm going to go ahead and remove you, and you can come back in. Okay. Oh,
Okay,
there we are. Yay. Good. Awesome. Okay. So if you have been with us, we have, I'm based in Tucson, Arizona. I'm the co-founder of the Force for Health Network. Usually we're joined by my partner, Dr. Robert Gillio, who has, out of the office for a couple reasons. He'll be joining us at the bottom of the hour. And then I'm joined here with Joshua Williams, our partner, our just partner, passionate, professional person who is really helping us launch this concept of Advance the Dream. I mean, he is an Alpha Phi Alpha. He comes from, the soul of where Martin Luther King really was able to grow and show in his early collegiate days. And it's been amazing what you and your peers, your multi-generational peers, have been able to do and bring conversation and voices to the table here. This is probably maybe our 32nd show over the last few seasons. And this year you wanted to do something different. So we are coming to you live on the 3 platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and that is under the Force for Health Network. But Joshua has been just itching my ear for the last 6-8 months saying, we got to do something specific for education. We got to do something that looks at a deep dive at not only education in general, but really, what is the state of union within the HBCUs? I mean, you used to head the Alumni Association from Dillard. You are a Dillard alumni. And again, your peers are in leadership roles across the country. I'm not just saying that this is an alpha thing in any way, shape, or form, but when we talk about advancing the dream, in the spirit of Martin Luther King, and it's not just a Black thing, it's not just a Black man thing. It's like it is a community, issue, so that as this concept of DEI starts crumbling, around the country, how do we all navigate these things together? So I'm so excited to have this platform. On the 3rd week of every month, we will be hyper-focusing on education for such a time as this, right? I've got if I pulled up our graphic, for such a time as this. I love that name that you offered up, and it really is. Let's take a look at the state of HBCU. So we've got some folks in actually backstage already, but before we bring them on, Josh, let's open up a little bit. Tell us why. Restate why you feel like this is such an important topic.
Let me first do an overview and a special thanks to, of course, the Force for Health organization, Lucy and Dr. Rob, for actually supporting me and providing this information to the public. It is important. It is very important in what we do as it relates to trying to continue to strengthen what Dr. Martin Luther King has already set forth for us to follow. I am so ecstatic from the standpoint that I get an opportunity now to actually further enhance this thing or this tool that we're utilizing to become better people, and that is education. So I'm without any doubt, before I go any further, I want to make sure that Lucy, Dr. Rob, and the people who are actually being able to support this particular piece are acknowledged, and they know that I am very, very thankful and grateful before we go any further. With that in mind, of course, for such a time as this, of course, that is a biblical reference, and we'll hear a little bit more about that as the show goes on. But I wanted to actually try and see if I could actually provide some information to the general public on the status of HBCUs, their importance, and why they mean so much to making sure that our nation grows, not just in the standpoint of Black people or brown people or colored people or white people, because we have all of those people attending HBCUs. It's not just a Black thing, as Lucy stated. It's a our thing, and we want everyone to take ownership in this piece as we try to strengthen not only just ourselves but our community, our nation, and everyone involved. So by establishing this piece, it actually gives us an overview, and we're going to bring in some people to actually talk about HBCUs, their importance, their experiences, all that good stuff, so that everyone can actually get a concrete understanding of why HBCUs was started back in the 1837, why the first one was started up in Pennsylvania at Cheney University. We want to actually get that information out there because a lot of people don't know. So we're hoping that this broadcast would be one of those vehicles that could actually help strengthen that information and education as it relates to the importance of our educational system.
And I love thank you for the recognition. I mean, Rob is kind of an old white guy. I won't say old. He's going to kill me for that. But he's in his 70s, in rural Pennsylvania. I am a part Filipino, part, my dad's from white Pennsylvania also. I'm married an African-American man, but advancing the dream and this whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and understanding that it's okay to put focus on disparity areas. It's okay to keep looking at where there can be improvements and, eradicate gaps. And so I love the conversation here because we are in like a state of flux, I believe, with DEI, now what, it really does start in the home, right? Yeah. It really does start with the parental and the family unit in terms of understanding and being compassionate and empathetic with cultural differences. And so, let's go ahead and kick this off with our guest.
Yeah.
Dr. Skip Mason, I would like you, go ahead. Did you have any extra things to say before we introduce the guests?
No, I'm ready to go with Dr. Mason and Dr. Alfred.
Okay, so I see Dr. Mason in the back. So let me go ahead and pull him up so that you can do your intro.
All righty, yeah. Dr. Skip Mason, Dr. Herman Skip Mason. This is a man that I actually met while I was in college, and I think he was probably just finishing up college. We both came through the same organization, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Skip has been a historian. And you'll see what I'm talking about when he begins to talk. He is a sponge of information as it relates to HBCUs, as it relates to historical moments. He has served as our 33rd general president, in which I had the opportunity to be appointed as one of his chairmen of the actual national convention that came to New Orleans. So he has been a friend. He has been a mentor. He has been that individual that I have looked up to for information to support our quest as we move forward. And without any further ado, because I know he has another meeting following this, I just would like to introduce and introduce to some people and present to others, Dr. Herman Skip Mason.
Good morning, Josh and
Wonderful.
Lucy. Good morning.
How
It's
you
nice.
doing, Doc?
It's nice to meet you, Dr.
Nice to
Mason.
meet you as well. Please call me Skip. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you all doing?
We're doing
We
fabulous.
are making it. We are making it.
Good.
And I will say congratulations. It was a little late of you being acknowledged as the president of the ITC there in Atlanta.
Well, thank you very much. It's interim president for now,
Okay.
but I'm honored to be at. It's my alma mater, and
Yes.
ITC is, of course, the consortium of seminaries in the Atlanta University Center, and it is the only theological institution which is a part of the United Negro College Fund. We were established in 1958. We consist of 5 seminaries: the United Methodist Church, the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the Church of God in Christ, and the Baptist denomination. So we have produced preachers and public servants and prophetic problem solvers, and many who've gone on to be bishops and established leaders across the country. So it's an honor to be back at my institution, my alma mater. And I'm a 4-time HBCU graduate. So I've experienced HBCUs all of my entire academic life.
I mean, it's the perfect jump point off. I mean, what do you feel the state of union is for HBCUs, and why do you feel it's necessary to join conversations like this to talk about what may need to be done, or maybe you guys are perfect right now and you don't need any help, support? What's the state of union?
Far from that. In 1944, Dr. Frederick Patterson, who was president of Tuskegee Institute, now university, gathered some of his presidential friends, including Mary McLeod Bethune and others, and they formed the United Negro College Fund as an advocate organization to advocate for Black colleges and universities across the country. And I can imagine what these institutions would be like if we did not have the UNCF, the land grant organizations that support land grant schools, agricultural schools, and they benefit students, but they're also an advocate for us in Washington, D.C. And so now the state of HBCUs is, of course, challenged by the flurry of changes taking place in Washington, D.C., with the pending removal of the Department of Education. So some things are really up in the air, but here's what I can tell you. HBCUs, Black colleges and universities, have always been resilient, founded with very little out of old cabins and buildings constructed by students, bricks made by the hands of students. HBCUs historically have learned how to find a way to make it, or make one. That's the motto of Clark Atlanta University. And so we are resilient, even though many of our institutions face severe financial challenges. The lack of equity and resources sometimes is challenged, but we're seeing an uptick. We're seeing a surge of students returning to HBCUs, and I believe that the dismantling of DEI programs is going to bring more back to HBCUs, and we welcome them with open arms. All schools have the mission, I believe, to create an opportunity to educate the masses of students who desire. 80% of your judges are HBCU graduates. About 50% of your lawyers and doctors have come from HBCU. So the record is unmatched. And you could just look around and people who are HBCU grads, and they are a living, walking testimony of the importance of these institutions. Alumni must continue to support and give back to the institutions. There should be no institutions going without considering the number of alumni that have graduated and the success of these graduates. But sometimes we don't instill the importance of giving back and supporting these institutions, but the programs that are offered, the skill set that helps our young men and women compete in today's world is unmatched. And then just the environment, the cultural environment is just something, experiencing HBCU events, activities, sports activities, homecoming events. It is just something very special, something very magical about that experience, which makes these schools so important. And we saw that very clearly defined in the rise and the candidacy of Kamala Harris, who took her whole HBCU experience and put it on the world stage for all people who didn't know very much about it. And I loved it because not once did she ever try to deny or hide that she went to an HBCU and that she was a member of a Black sorority and all of those cultural nuances that come with that. So we still got a lot of work to do and a lot of advocacy to receive. But I think that, we're going to continue to do as we've always done. We're going to press on and make a way out of no way.
And I feel like when you were saying some of those numbers, like 80% of engineers or 70% of judges, and when I say restate these numbers, please don't take them literally because of my memory, but generally speaking, when you were saying those, you were meaning that 70% of African-American judges were coming in, right?
I may have left that important term out.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yes.
But what I want to just amplify for everybody is that I feel like all three of us are Gen X, right? We're probably in our late 40s, 50s, early 60s.
Oh, you're so kind. But I would ask you to take your glasses off, get a piece of tissue, and wipe your lens so you can look closer. No, I'll be 63 on my next birthday.
Okay, so you're my husband's age, baby, last year of baby boomer, maybe an old Gen X. But what I'm saying is that when you make those statements, I feel like you guys are really the first trailblazers to come out of the HBCUs when you did and get and persevere in industries to then get to those leadership roles. And I think people don't realize that the inequities within the African-American space is not that long ago. You don't have to go more than 50 years back. Well, now it's 2024, 50 years ago puts us at 1975, right? And 10 years before were the 60s.
Right.
And so I feel like there's a big difference if you're 63, 64, 58 versus if you're 68, 70.
Well, I think that every decade created and opened up avenues and chipped at the ceiling. My parents are graduates of Morris Brown College, my alma mater, in the 1950s.
Okay.
Now, their professions were somewhat limited. You were going to come out and be an educator, a teacher, or you would go on perhaps to graduate school and try to find a program. Many of the white institutions were not admitting students, particularly in the South, and those desiring to go into law had to go to other places to attempt that. But I think that, we've been educating. Josh mentioned 1837. I mean, we've been educating. We've been creating opportunities to further advance the race, and create a professional middle class group of citizens. And I think that is the beauty in nature. W.E.B. Du Bois called it the talented 10th, that 1/10 of the educated population would go and work to make sure that the next 10. Booker T. Washington had the philosophy that we would be educated, but we would create our own. We would work with our hands, and we would build and open stores and industry. And so everyone has contributed. I mean, I'm very blessed and fortunate. My mom and dad were both the first one. Well, my mom was the first in her family. My dad followed my aunt. She was the first to go to college, and then my dad went to college. But even in the 50s, for many families, that was still quite a privilege,
Yeah.
and a luxury to go. My mom says that was a whole family event when she went to college, that everybody was involved in making sure that she had the money she needed to, attend college. So, now each decade, the 60s broke through as going through the civil rights movement, and opportunities were made. Definitely the 70s. I mean, we're really seeing the expansion of Black intellect into the corporate environment, and reaching new heights and new plateaus. And we stand on really, those of us who came out of school. I graduated from college in 1984, and then went on and did all of my graduate work in the 80s and 90s, and so we stand on gigantic shoulders. So much was paved for us, things we did not have to push through, experiences that we did not have to endure in order to achieve, our academic desires.
And I see Dr. Alford backstage, but I don't see his picture. And when I do see his video, perhaps I'll bring him into the conversation. And then, of course, yeah. I have a question for you. If you were, I'm just going to bring up an image we talked about last time, and this is the image I want you to react to. And it's really in the state of this administration, right? How can we all work together to preserve HBCUs? Do you feel like it's even possible? And kind of what's your state of the union feedback within the administration right now for HBCUs?
Well, I feel some kind of way seeing an overlay of Dr. King's image over Trump, who is the antithesis of every absolute thing that Dr. King and those of his era during the civil rights movement have stood for. And here is one who is dismantling all of the gains and accomplishments, not just for African Americans, but for Latino Americans and other genders and groups, and who has taken away Black History Month celebrations from the White House and others. Every year there was a huge Black History Month celebration. So, and HBCUs are included in that. We are monitoring, and UNCF has a governmental liaison department who is managing and sending us briefs daily as it relates to what is going on in Washington with the Department of Ed, because the Department of Ed manages student financial loans and aid.
Right.
Schools depend on the Department of Ed for drawdowns and payouts to take care of tuition and other aspects of that. And so we're not sure how, but we are very strong in our belief that things eventually will work out, and that HBCUs may be harmed but not totally damaged, if you will, and that cooler heads will prevail. But here's the piece. When you impact the Department of Ed, you're not only impacting HBCUs, PWIs as well, all educational institutions.
And for the knowledge of our viewer that doesn't know what a PWI
is, predominantly white institution.
That's
as
right.
well. So this is a colorblind impact. DEI, if the thoughts or thinking is that it is going after and trying to prevent Black folks, then they are mistaken in their knowledge and understanding of what DEI really means and who it represents, including women and including other ethnic groups, including those with disabilities, and including, of course, African Americans as well.
How do you respond? And I see Dr. Alford back there with the picture, not video yet, but the how do you respond when President Trump makes the claim that he has provided more funding to HBCUs than any other president in history?
I'm like Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Bring me the receipts. I want to see the receipts. Now,
so even you in your position, the information or the receipts, the evidence, is not obvious.
It is not obvious to me. Now, mind you, I've only been in my position for 5 months. Okay. So, to be quite honest, I can't speak for what Trump did in the previous administration, his previous administration, as it benefited historic Black colleges and universities, and also, but I understand that, part of his playbook and part of his language and wording is always to say he's done more than any other president. Okay, we've heard that not just for HBCUs, but in various other subjects and topics as well. And so saying it and demonstrating it is another thing. So if he has done a lot, I can't speak to that. I'm only speaking with my knowledge of, the limited time that I have been president of the institution.
I love this conversation. We will continue it. I wasn't sure if you were able to stay on for the next segment.
I told Joshua 11:45. I have a funeral. I'm a pastor as well.
Okay. Yes.
And initially the funeral was at 12 noon. And interesting, before I spoke with Joshua last night, the family changed it to 1, which was fine. That's how I'm on right now. Otherwise, I would not have been able to accept that. But I do need to end at 11:45.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and wisdom. I mean, obviously, this is a long conversation.
It is.
Final thoughts before we introduce.
We'll let him stay until 11:45 because I wanted him to meet Dr. Alford as he comes on, our fraternity brother from up at William Patterson University. Who's a faculty member as well as a administrator. He chairs the master's program at William Patterson up there. He's a graduate of a HBCU as well. So we were going to talk with him a little bit to get a little bit of his appreciation and knowledge and understanding of coming from an HBCU and also going to a PWI. And Dr. Alford, if you are on, we'd like to welcome you to the stage.
Okay, awesome. And it looks like he may be coming in audio only.
Hello?
Oh,
Hello?
okay, good. You can hear us?
I can hear you, but there seems to be some issue with the camera. It's on. Everything is on over on my end. You always have these issues, right?
You know what? As long as your picture's up and, and then
this is interesting. So, well, hello, and thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I wish you could see my face.
We can see your wonderful face. And Dr. Mason, when you need to fade, go ahead and leave the studio, okay? But thank you for joining us.
Well, I just want to greet Brother Dr. Alford as well.
Yes, thank you, brother.
Thank you, Brother Mason, once again, and I'd like to say hats off to you. Thanks very much.
Okay. And then Dr. Alford, thank you for joining us. I'll just leave your picture up, right? As you speak on these things. So tell us a little bit about why you felt compelled to accept Josh's invitation to come and talk about, kind of the state of the union of HBCUs now, and from your perspective, what you'd like to share right now.
Lucy.
Yes.
Because I told him.
Go ahead, Dr. Alford, in your words.
Yes. Well, Josh has been somewhat of a mentor for me for some time now, and I've admired the work of Dr. Mason. So, and the work that he's done on history and been a historian. So, but the reason why I chose this opportunity, because I wanted to actually speak to the issues that you all are raising in regards to the work on DEI, but as well as the work that historically Black colleges and universities have done. You know, we often look at this work as deficit model work, but the work that HBCUs have done has been extraordinary. And I think Dr. Mason touched on this. He kind of gave us a really good timeline about those trailblazers and pioneers of the HBCU movement. And when we think about Mary McLeod Bethune, when we think about Du Bois, and we think about Washington and the work that they've done to advance HBCUs, not only do we see them as opening doors or making a way out of no way, is a term that was used earlier. What we really don't realize is that those individuals were the first group of educators to train the first group of civil rights activists. And when we think about the work that they did in between 1920 and 1940, those individuals who were educated at Lincoln, at Straight College, Fisk, those individuals trained those people who would then come about in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, who would then fight for the rights of Black people in a very different way. So this work is just not, isolated, but it's built on the history and all the contributions that those forefathers and foremothers put in place for us at these HBCUs, like, we said Mary McLeod Bethune, but so many others. So the importance of going to these institutions is to carry on the legacy, to make sure that we don't just rest on what they have done, but that we build on it and we continue to build on it so that HBCUs will be around for another 200 years.
Well, how do you feel in 2025 on the State of the Union? What do you guys need? I'm sure it's money, because it always is, but what are some of the avenues that we can really put some pressure on some folks to start moving the needle if it is something so important to preserve?
I think that's a really good question, and one that many scholars in the field kind of shy away from because it becomes a criticism. But I'm going to turn this criticism into something that is different. And as we talk about the benefits, in order to benefit from this experiment of an HBCU that has proven itself to be worthwhile and that has proven itself to be everything that those founders thought it would be in uplifting a race, the criticism is this: if we are to see another 150 to 200 years, we're going to have to examine leadership, and we're going to have to examine leadership in a very meaningful and intentional way. Now, what does that mean when we say examine leadership? I am talking about those individuals who have been entrusted to be the caretakers of our institutions, such as those boards of trustees and those presidencies, right? Those individuals are going to have to take a hard look at themselves and make sure that before they take on these huge responsibilities, that they are prepared to be open-minded, that they are prepared to do the work, and that they are prepared to understand the greater needs that have evolved. We're not where we were in the 1920s. We're in 2025. So what does a 2025 HBCU look like? In light of this current administration, right? And we think, we're going to have him for 4 years and then we could go back to normalcy. We know nothing ever goes back to normalcy, right? So how do we manage, support, and advance the mission of our HBCUs in an anti-DEI climate? How do we do that? And I think right now there's an attack on education. So then the first thought on everything is to educate people to be better citizens, right? Well, that's not working. That's probably not going to work because of the attack on funding to HBCUs and minority serving institutions. I think.
Well, I do think that the start of being a more empathetic and literate citizen starts in the home. I do I do think that education, higher education as a whole, right, at HBCUs is a subset of the whole higher ed space. And so I almost feel like you've got a tsunami of different, it's like what do you call it? A triple storm, a quadruple storm that's happening for not only higher ed, but the HBCUs. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. But part of me, what I'm trying to remind people is as DEI dismantles, right, under governmental administration, that doesn't mean that we as citizens should stop talking about it or practicing it or, starting in the home, just being more kind and understanding and culturally empathetic. Anyways, I think the cost of higher ed is really being questioned, at the same time of the specific struggles of the HBCUs.
Yes, I think you're right. And to your point, now is the time to do even greater work with DEI and inclusion. And I think the places to do it, so going back to the topic of the benefit of HBCUs, those spaces will always embrace DEI work.
Right.
So
it's embedded.
Right. So the benefit now to being a part of the HBCU community is if the idea of DEI work has been halted or stopped at many of these public state institutions that are now afraid of what's going to happen, the benefit is go right to the HBCUs who will welcome the conversations, who will hire people from different religious, ethnic, ability areas. Those are the new, what we call safe spaces, because in these spaces, not only will Black students be able to thrive, but students from all walks of life will be able to enter into their gates and learn in spaces and from individuals who will never stop talking DEI talk, who will always look like whatever our nation is telling us not to look like and sound like. So,
and for the benefit of the public, I am not a chief medical officer. My partner is a chief medical officer. I really represent kind of the mainstream mom out there in the US, maybe a B+ in everything, but not an A in anything. So I'm just going to ask a couple quick questions, for an HBCU, can I be a white person or Mexican, Filipino and go to an HBCU?
Well, absolutely. The first HBCUs that were founded from, I know we talked about 1837 with the Institute of Colored Youth, but at Lincoln, at Fisk, at many of these HBCUs, white students were educated alongside Black students from their initial founding, because those white presidents and those white faculty members educated their children. Talk about DEI, educated their children alongside those Black students. So we history is what it is, and we sometimes forget about these things that happen because they're not constantly in our social media cycles and feeds every day. But the initial HBCUs, or the founding of HBCUs, were inclusive from their nature. Taking cues from schools like Oberlin, University of Chicago, who had already integrated their schools. There was never a time in the history of HBCUs missions that they ever excluded. It was always to provide education for all who entered their gates.
And I think, I don't know if you're listening to Dr. Mason's portion on just the expansion, like generationally. His parents went to the HBCUs, but professionally, they didn't have as many opportunities as perhaps the second generation that went through the HBCUs that now are sitting in judges' seats and, presidential seats, et cetera, right? Really. So I feel like, to me, from an outsider looking in, I think one of the huge value points of the HBCUs is not only an education with cultural empathy and celebration, right? and it's embraced and allowed. But to be able to be part of a network now that can reach down and support and place, like that's never really been as strong in the history before, you know. And the more I work with Josh and the more I see how close, you know, just being part of the Divine Nine, you know, especially if you're Divine Nine from an HBCU, I mean, it's just, it's crazy the quality of network, alumni network that the HBCUs represent. I'm just throwing that out there as because from an outsider, that's where I see a huge upside that the other institutions might not have as strong for the advancement of, you know, minorities.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hidden gems of being a part of an HBCU, particularly for those people who don't know much about the work that HBCUs offer. It is amazing to enter into a corporate room or an educational setting and to see people look at us and go, how do you know this person? Or, you know, I don't understand, like you all went to two different schools. And it's that quiet,
yes,
you know, idea of, well, we both went to HBCUs, so we were educated very like we have something in common. And I think because that is almost like a hidden language that no one else know we speak, you know, the HBCU, you know, vocabulary of understanding each other. It is an amazing benefit. And the friendships that have come about and the support, you know, I have a niece that's gone to Hampton. I went to Dillard University, but there's always that idea of saying, you know, Dillard may not have this major, but we're going to support another HBCU who has what you're looking for. And creating those networking opportunities to say, okay, you know, I'm in education, I'm a professor. Okay, how can I help your niece? How can I help your son get access to the resources at an HBCU? It's been, and many of my writing opportunities and publications have been because I have established relationships with other members of the HBCU community who's interested in doing the work that I'm doing. I will say this one thing that a lot of people don't know about the history. You talk about networking. The original networking with HBCU started during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, when many of these Black educated folk who graduated from HBCUs in the South were not allowed to attend these wonderful graduate programs in the South. And because of segregation, their states paid for them to attend these extraordinarily great Ivy League institutions like Columbia and Harvard and University of Chicago. So every summer, a group of Black folks from Fisk, from Dillard, from Xavier, they would travel to Columbia, NYU, and University of Chicago every summer to be educated. And many of them gained their graduate credentials because of segregation in the South. But it was a network. And as they graduated and finished their education, many of them settled in the Northeast and created their own enclaves of education where they were able to thrive in these middle class to upper middle class communities and educate their children and their families very differently. But that was due to that network, that HBCU network.
Yes. What they used to call the 3-2 program. Yeah.
And Callie Wade, Dr. Callie Wade writes a lot about this in her work. Really, if anybody's interested in reading about it.
And you guys both came from Dillard, or alumni of Dillard, and then Dr. Alfred, you are at William Peterson?
I'm at William Patterson University.
Patterson, I'm sorry, which would be designated as a PWI, right?
Yes,
I'm still new to these terms.
So William Patterson is both a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution, as well as an MSI, which is a minority serving institution. Because
what's the difference between an HBCU, a PWI, and what the last distinction that you just said?
You know, that's a really good question. We just assume that people know.
Yes, no, we don't.
And then there's tribal colleges too. So we don't want to forget our sisters and brothers who attend the tribal colleges. But The HBCUs, of course, are historically Black colleges and universities. And within the HBCU system, there's another tier. There's the UNCF schools, and then there are the Thurgood Marshall schools. The UNCF schools are pretty much those private institutions who have come together through, and I think Dr. Mason talked about what happened in 1944 with Patterson forming this UNCF network. And then so HBCUs although there's like 99 to 100 of them, they're classified as UNCF schools, Thurgood Marshall schools, or 1890 schools. So that's one. Then the predominantly white institutions or traditionally white institutions are just institutions that were initially founded to educate white males, right? Which would be pretty much the LSUs, the University of Texas, those schools that have traditionally had white student populations. The MSIs are just not HB. These are schools that were already founded, but over time, their population has reached a certain number of students from other diverse backgrounds, maybe, Latinx communities, Black communities. And so it's not just because, remember, the definition of HBCU is from saying that you have to be founded before 1965.
That's what I was thinking, that there was a date distinction play in there. 1965. Got it.
There's a date distinction for a federal, it's said by the federal government saying that
designation,
right? So then there's HSIs, Hispanic Serving Institutions.
Yeah.
And what HSIs mean is that at least 25% or more of your student population has a Hispanic or Latinx community.
Like, I believe University of Arizona is a Hispanic serving institution.
It is.
Yeah. I just think it's important when we throw those out, that because we're trying to educate and bring awareness to the general public. I think that the general public is the only way we can talk about disparities, because everybody talks in their silos. And if you're only talking to your like people, then we're never going to, cross-pollinate and be able to get along, so to speak, and advance together. Question for you. So with your perspective from a PWI standpoint, HBCU standpoint, and again, I don't know, I haven't done my research on this. I'm curious to get what your perspective is. Are HBCUs more dependent on, are the students going to HBCUs more dependent on grants and financial aid than the general public going into your standard PWI or your regular institution? Is there a disproportionate dependency on financial aid going into HBCUs, or not really?
I'm careful in answering that question, because my initial response to that is it depends on the HBCU that the student, has applied to, because when we, not all, the Black community is such a diverse community, and you're having students come from, different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so their needs, their financial needs will vary.
Got it.
But what I will say to that is that perhaps we've seen a greater need for many students. We've seen a greater financial need for most students. I mean, when we think about student loans and Pell Grants, Black students aren't the largest recipients of those social and those government assisted programs, right? We can't be, for the mere fact that we don't make up the population.
Exactly. And can we just say that out loud? I mean, African American, I think it's about a 13-14%, right? Across the country.
Yeah. So so it's a complicated, very nuanced answer to, if you look at a school like William Patterson, which I am, the need base of students is very high. So, but if you look at a school like Columbia, where there's a different population of students, it could, it's very different. So, I think that we have to be careful in categorizing, ourselves that way, and think more about, is education a right? And should students, no matter what your socioeconomic background be, should we make a way for every student to have access to higher education for the greater good. And right now we're seeing an attack on these things. And, you know, DEI, there's also reports that this particular administration is intending on taxing scholarships in grant money.
I heard that's crazy. As a mother of a D1 athlete scholarship winner, if we were taxed on a $250,000 scholarship, that is, it would be so detrimental. I mean, it basically negates the whole point of the scholarship, because you're trying to serve folks that, you know, can't write a $40,000 check. I mean, come on.
But the intention of this current administration is to punish and penalize those people who they think benefit the most from these scholarships, right? In their mind, they're saying, well, the people who need these scholarships the most are people from minoritized or marginalized communities. So how do we further penalize them or oppress them so that they're not able to participate in higher education? So, you know, one of the benefits I think that we can look at here is, though, we do have the UNCF fund, we do have the Thurgood Marshall Fund that is there to assist students whenever there is a financial gap for them. And those foundations are so important to us, and they have done extraordinary work in helping our students get access to education.
You know, Josh, we're rounding out the hour, and of course, just so much. This could be a 6-hour long, you know, marathon broadcast as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, I think for the last question here, and let's just bring it into reality. I mean, let's go straight to when you were head of the Alumni Association for Dillard. You were right there trying to solve for funding gaps, like to better support the nursing program, right? Which was, I think, the first official nursing program within the HBCU college system. You know, well, what's the pain of those directors of alumni? And what do you feel like you'd like to leave us contemplating here until next time?
Well, as Dr. Alpha has stated, you got so many different. It's and I want to go back to the question you asked him, because my best answer is that is to give you from a standpoint of experience. When I came to Dillard, I came from one of those small country towns where I had a scholarship to Florida A&M, to Florida State, to Alabama, but I chose to go to Dillard. Number one, I thought that by going to Dillard, I had a better opportunity to meet some of the people who kind of was more nurturing to me than just being a number in a classroom at a bigger institution. As well, the cost was not the same. You know, right along with the cost being a little different, right along with knowing some of the people that were there at Dillard, one quote unquote relationships, what Dr. Alfred just thought about. That was very, very important in my decision to go to an HBCU. And when I got there, you know, it wasn't so much about the money. Was definitely the difference in tuition was definitely a challenge, but
meaning it was more expensive or less expensive? I just don't know what you're saying there.
Well, an HBCU, a small HBCU like that, you're talking about almost this, once you put in if they're charging out of state fees, in-state fees, that stuff kind of raises up, but it's actually cheaper than the big PWI I was talking about going to. And they didn't give me as much financial aid as I got by going to an HBCU. So all of those differences played a part into decision-making as it relates to how I was going to go and what I was going to go and do. Being at Dillard, the relationships that I formed at Dillard helped me to be where I am today, without a doubt.
They really have. I mean, you've got everybody within your Alpha and your Dillard and Louisiana right there. That core group.
Yeah. I definitely stand on that, because I wouldn't be nowhere. The information that I have received, the information I have learned, the people that I've been associated with from there has been absolutely outstanding
and lifelong.
Yes. And Right.
and lifelong.
And can I add this to that? Josh bring up a good point. Had it not been for Dillard, I would not have been able to succeed and do well at Columbia University, which is a very different environment. It was a culture shock, right? It was an Ivy League institution. Sometimes we suffer from imposter syndrome. We don't think that we belong there. People will tell you that you got in on affirmative action and all of these types of things are there. But Dillard gave me the foundational tools that I needed to succeed. And not only did I feel, Dillard's motto is expedite forward, it's from confidence, courage. It gave me the confidence and courage I needed to go out and not only do well, but compete at the highest level. Mm-hmm. So that, and I was often told, when I went to do my work on HBCUs, they said, oh no, we're not preparing you to do research on institutions like that. This is a research one. But I stuck to the foundation of Dillard. This is what Dillard trained me to do. And I wanted to go back into those types of communities and be a part of that talented tent. So I thank Dillard every day for this education, because I would not be here had it not been for Dillard.
Exactly.
Well, like we said, and like we continue to say, the fight lives on, advancing the dream and extending the legacy and the intention and objectives of this generation, of Martin Luther King's generation, through the families, through to the next generation, is what we are here for. Whether or not higher education shakes out to what it's going to be, moving forward all the way across the board. I think that there's going to be, some dishevelment there for everybody, not just HBCUs. But it's interesting that the takeaway from this conversation to me is that the dismantling of DEI almost serves to the favor. To me, I feel like it does serve to the favor of the HBCUs, because it's almost like home. If I'm an African American student and I feel like I'm not going to get what I feel like I need, the easy and safe decision seems to be, hey, I'm going to go find HBCU, because that's should be an accelerating family network and support experience. That's what I feel.
But that had already started to occur during 2022 and 2021, during this the Black Lives Matter movement and many other things that were happening that was racially motivated in the country. If you go back and look at the National Center for Education statistics, it will show you that enrollment at HBCUs had a steady increase from 22 to 25, record-breaking numbers at schools like Howard.
Okay, interesting. So social justice can push.
Social justice.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. Final thoughts going around the table. I'll give it to you, Dr. Alfred.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you again, and thank you, Josh, and you too as well, Lucy, for creating a platform for us to have this conversation, and also allowing other voices to come to the table to talk about this rather than the same voices. Right, because we need to make room for everyone to have this important conversation. But my final thought on this is to not give up. HBCUs have weathered much worse than this. There's been World War I, World War II, Great Depressions, and they are still standing. So we have to think about that. I think Dr. Mason would want me to say that we need to contribute to these HBCUs, make sure we give back financially, put them in your wills, make them a part of your estate plan. Make sure that you join your associations. What I would say is that we need to start thinking about training the next generation of HBCU leaders and making sure that they are prepared to do this work in a much stressful environment. But and I know there are several institutes out there that is trying to do this work, but we also need to be more intentional about who we put on our boards of trustees so that they are prepared to do the work and understand the needs of these HBCUs. So I'm more concerned with leadership, because without good leadership, we're not going to make it. Long gone are those great presidents like the W.E.B. Du Bois's. Samuel Du Bois Cooks and Norman Francis. You know, those were extraordinary leaders. Dr. Harvey at Hampton, Xavier's Norman Francis and Dillard, Dr. Cook. We need to find leadership like that again to usher us into our highest potential. So I'll end there with just focusing on leadership.
I love it.
Dr. Alpha, that is so true, and I'll copy him, Lucy, on that piece, because serving on the boards, you get an opportunity to understand who you're dealing with, who's there in your presence, and what they actually stand for, and that is a very, very, very important part that Dr. Alpha has just leaped on, about finding the right people to fit your board of directors, who understands the direction, to understand what the past presidents did. Dr. Norman Francis, Cook, Dr. Cook, all of these great leaders that we had at these HBCUs. Understand why they lasted so long and why the university did such a good job during that time. We have to concentrate, and I think that's the institute, Dr. Alpha. That's a part of my study that I'm doing right now in the PhD program, that I'm glad that we kind of had an opportunity to lend a little information to. And we're going to come back and have another session directly on the leadership on these HBCUs and how that leadership affects the direction of the university. So I'm glad that you had an opportunity to share with us that, you and Dr. Mason, on this first platform of education. I really appreciate it. And I just want to thank you guys, because you gave me a lot of information to ponder on. I have a student that's dictating some of this, of course, in different language for other students. So as we go through this, sometimes I have to talk on the phone a little bit and say certain things over again. So, but I am so pleased at the opportunity to be able to present some of this information to our community and people that have the same vision as we do. Thanks again, man.
Thank you.
And on that note, one of the big reasons why we've decided to launch this brand, this channel, this community with Josh as our national lead here is the power to connect and collaborate and contribute and celebrate cannot happen in quarterly Zoom meetings or monthly Zoom meetings that you don't know people on. So Advance the Dream is an online community supported by the Force for Health Network. It has access to a health academy. You can join for free and connect. We invite you, Dr. Alfred and Dr. Mason, when he comes back, to join as mentors, to join as advisors to this group, so that we can start connecting and then carrying on the momentum of these wonderful conversations. Okay, so that's kind of my takeaway is let's connect and then let's start contributing and then growing from there. But always with a health focus first, because if you don't take care of your own health, then the ability to serve, and grow and be is at risk. And so the mental health, the health disparities will kind of lead some of these initiatives that we've got going on at Advance the Dream. So we invite you to join over there. Of course, we invite you, Dr. Alfred, as a advisor over to the Advance the Dream, and we'll get you some information about that a little bit later. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful kickoff start to this educational series that we've got going on here. Josh, thank you. The fact that you can bring HBCU educational leaders, and again, expanding beyond that as well, to really take a deeper dive into this thing called higher ed and how we can preserve the sanctity and the importance and the critical significance of the historic Black colleges for the many reasons we talked about today, and continue to talk and see if we can push through navigating a very interesting environment that we have right now. But, merit, DEI, cultural empathy, those are kind of like the things that are the words that I'm throwing out for people to just chew on and ponder. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Ma'am.
until so in our next show, we'll kind of revert back to more of a focus on health and family heroes and highlights, and that'll be the first Saturday of the month. So until then, take care, everybody. Have a wonderful Saturday. Get out there, be a force for health, learn, live, share, and remember that you do matter. One of Josh's nonprofit clubs that he serves multi-generational tech and educational clubs for. And remember to just advance the dream. Okay, take the pledge, advance the dream. If you see something, say something. Until next time, take care.
All right.